Metanomics is brought to you by Remedy Communications and Doosan Writers Metaverse.
You used a phrase that usually makes sense when we're on talk shows speaking in English, our government. But of course, we're in Second Life. This is very international, and just looking at Metanomics itself, I'm in the U.S. We're actually owned by a Toronto-based company, and our broadcast company is in Australia. I know we have people in the audience from Germany, Belgium, India, so on and so forth, and so it certainly gets tricky cross-jurisdictionally. And I wanted to ask you about this because I know that you just came back from a conference called Child Protection, Free Speech and the Internet, Mapping Territory and Limitations of Common Ground. That took place in Oxford and had people from all over the world there. And so I guess I'm just wondering, first, were there any particular lessons you take away about differences in perspectives across the countries, or how people are looking to solve the international aspect of this?
Oh, absolutely, Rob. In fact, every time I visit Europe or other continents and countries, I'm struck by the different cultural visions and values and differences that basically really raise the question of how we're going to deal with these things going forward for a borderless medium like the internet and for borderless virtual communities. Let me give you just one concrete example. I've been in Europe many times over the past 5 or 6 years, and every time I'm there, I usually get needled by some of my European friends or even by European policymakers about how we Americans are very puritanical and a little bit backwards when it comes to matters of sexuality or sexual expression, and how the Europeans just don't understand why we get so worked up over these things, such as the famous Janet Jackson episode during the Super Bowl or other things, and why we regulate all of this stuff obsessively. And I have to admit, it perplexes me at times too. But then in the same breath, my European friends will turn around and say, but why don't you Americans do something about violent speech or hate speech? We need to shut that down. And of course, we in America don't really try to regulate violently themed media or content at all, and we don't regulate hate speech. These things are fully protected by our First Amendment in the United States. So here you have two very, very different standards on either side of the Atlantic, with the Europeans being worried about violent media or violent content as well as hate speech, and we Americans being more obsessed with sexual themes or vulgarity. Well, how in the world do you harmonize those values across borders for transborder kind of sites online or services online that defy geography? And this is, in fact, a topic of one of my 7 books that I've written or edited. I edited a book called Who Rules the Net, and basically asked a bunch of academics and others to explore this question. And I'm sad to report we didn't have a definitive answer. It's a really, really tough question about how to deal with this. But my preference would be that we not allow sort of the internationalization or the international harmonization of these questions, or else what ends up happening is you have what I would call a lowest common denominator regulatory standard, which is to say we end up regulating content according to whoever has the most sensitivity about it across the globe. I would rather take the opposite approach and leave these online communities largely free to operate as they wish, and only at the boundaries or the margins where there's truly egregious behavior that crosses a line that everyone would agree on. For example, child pornography, where everyone in every culture and continent can generally agree we need to eradicate that. But on these other matters, I'd prefer to leave these communities free to police themselves online and not have, say, a United Nations for the Internet or something like that, or for Second Life, God forbid.